It's hard to tell sometimes if the yowling's for the dead or just for the heat. The air was thick that day, cicadas hissing, lawnmowers growling in the distance. Hot. So hot it felt disrespectful to stand still in it. And yet, as my father shoveled dirt over Papa's coffin, I was cold, numb, couldn't even cry. And that felt like a sin. "It's all right to grieve," Aunt June whispered, her voice soft as her church hat. Tears slid from under her sunglasses while she fanned herself with the funeral program. But what she really meant was, it's shameful not to cry. Shameful to stand over your own grandfather's grave with dry eyes. Still, grief has never been a dress I could just slip on, wide-brimmed hat, string of pearls, black heels. I couldn't wear it unless it fit, and that day it didn't. So I said, "Who's catering? I'm starved. Laud." June hissed and smacked my arm with that flimsy program. The ground itself seemed to rebel against the ceremony. Bone-white laurels punched through the dirt like tiny fists. My uncle trampled their petals as he strolled up, a banjolele, half banjo, half ukulele, slung over his shoulder. A strange, stringed contradiction caught between mourning and celebration. "For Papa," he said, and strummed. And wouldn't you know, the music lifted. Bluegrass low at first, then swinging light, almost joyful. Hips swayed, feet stomped. It was too cheery for a funeral, but that was the point. It felt like nobody knew whether to weep or dance, least of all me. Now, don't misunderstand. I didn't hate Papa. I just never figured out how to like him. He was war and whiskey most days, a monster in his anger, yet human when he told stories. And oh, he could lie smoother than a used car salesman on the last day of the month. But some of his tales carried truth, like how his own father made him wait outside town shops, too ashamed to be seen with his son whose skin was darker than his own. Some truths sat heavy, unfinished, like the war stories he never finished, always ending in a grunt, a silence, and the bottom of another bottle. The last time I saw him, a few months before he died, he was shrunk by cancer, slumped in that ugly olive recliner with its guts spilling out. Thin, weak, but no less mean. June leaned close and whispered, "He still flies off the handle over nothing." And yet, she told me he'd been bragging to the neighbors about me, about how his grandkid got into college. In our little Appalachian town, that was Olympic gold. So when I walked in, Papa hugged me, then pressed a cigar into my hand, even though he always swore smokes weren't for girls. That evening, we rocked on the porch, smoked together as the sky shifted from gold to purple. Fireflies blinked in the weeds. For the first time, maybe ever, he asked me about school. Really asked. Wanted to know. He slapped his knee when I told him how I aced my first exam. See, Papa didn't get sons he could brag on. My dad and his brothers never made it through high school, and most of my cousins spent more time locked up than out chasing dope. Papa didn't get boys. He got me. "There's a spirit in these woods," he said suddenly, eyes dark. He told me a story about a lost soul who whistles past the willows in summer, always near graves. A man carrying his father's bones in a sack, looking for a place to bury them, but never finding one. Why not? I asked. Papa scratched his beard. Some things can't be put away, no matter how hard you try. For a moment, he went quiet. Then he snapped, bellowing for June to bring him a beer. She was too slow. And when she finally brought it, he hurled it at her, glass shattering just shy of her head. And still, June cared for him, kept his meds sorted, bathed him when his legs gave out. That's how he repaid her. He asked if I'd come back soon. I told him maybe, but I lied. To him, women were maids and half-brains. But even with my so-called half-brain, I was smart enough to get out before he turned me into June. Now here I was, standing in the graveyard, willows drooping like mourners. A gust of wind moved their boughs ghost-like, and I heard his voice again, only in summer, by the graves. He carries his father's bones, never lays them down. But when I looked, I didn't see spirits. Just Dad, standing stiff, shoulders knotted with old pain. The sniffles around us, the wails, they weren't for Papa the man, but for the versions of him nobody got. Dad marched toward me. I noticed the mark still on his arm, that patch of dark skin from when Papa pressed a lighter to him, punishment for stealing gum as a child. He waved a hand in front of my face. Hotter than the hinges of hell out here, y'all right? I nodded, and for once, it wasn't a lie. I was fine, cold, empty, which somehow felt worse than being sad. Made me feel like a beast, as if I belonged in the woods on all fours instead of in a dress and heels. The crowd drifted away toward the little white church that gleamed like a diamond in dirt. I was glad. Glad for the end of platitudes, for the silence after the wailing. Dad didn't follow the crowd. Instead, he motioned me toward the parking lot. We sat on the bed of his truck, the metal hot enough to sear through cloth. Neither of us moved. He handed me a water bottle, still steaming from the heat, hands trembling just enough for me to notice. I wanted to ask if he was glad Papa was gone. Wanted to, but couldn't. The question felt wicked. Think you'll miss him? I asked instead. Dad didn't answer right away, just stared at the ground. When he finally spoke, he said, "I'll miss who he could have been." That stuck in my chest. Then he turned, cleared his throat, and said, "I'm proud of you, you know that." Hell, you're the only good thing about me. I smiled, tight, awkward. Neither of us were good with feelings, but I knew he meant it. I knew, too, that if he'd been raised by Papa the way he raised me, he'd have been worse. At least I got scraps. He got starved. He lit a cigarette, walked to the tree line, and whistled low into the heat. And that's when it hit me. A single tear sliding hot down my cheek. Relief. Proof there was still flesh under the stone in my chest. But the tear wasn't for Papa. It was for Dad. Because just burying a man doesn't mean the hurt goes down with him. Papa carried the weight of his father's cruelty. Dad carried Papa's. And now here I was, praying it stopped with me. If Papa were here, he'd probably tell a story. A lie, maybe, or a truth half hidden. But he's not. And maybe that's best. I wiped my face, dry once again, and headed toward the church. The sun whipped my skin, the air still thick with heat, but I carried something invisible as I walked. Not flowers. Not grief I didn't feel. Bones, his bones,